Good morning, everyone out there on my LinkedIn Live. My name is Trisha Tate. I am CEO of FinCore. We're a fractional CFO and accounting services company. And I'm also author of the book, Dancing with Numbers, Grow a Financially Healthy Business and Choreograph the Life That You Want. It's on Amazon and Audible. And today we have Carrie Kirpin of the Whisper Group on our Dancing with Numbers in Real Life LinkedIn Live show. When I was writing the book, one of the, I would say, most insightful moments in writing the book were listening to stories of business owners, particularly women business owners who didn't have a great relationship with their numbers. And then through the evolution of their business, grew multi-million dollar businesses, sold some of them, but became like besties with their numbers. And I wanted to bring that to real life, those conversations, because I feel like we should normalize conversations around money, and numbers can be fun. And that's the goal of Dancing with Numbers in Real Life. So I am happy to have Carrie here to talk about all the work that she is doing. First, the evolution of her business and all the work that she is doing to advance this message and normalization of money, or around money and numbers, particularly for women business owners. So Carrie, tell us a little bit about yourself. Welcome to my show.
Thank you, Trisha. I'm so excited to be here. I've loved watching you and your journey, and I love the way that you really talk about numbers in a way that sort of demystifies them, because it can be really like intimidating when you're first learning how to deal with numbers. Most of us who start businesses don't start them because we love numbers, unless we're going into an accounting field. We start them because we have a business idea. So that's really a cool thing that you're doing. About me, I started one of the world's first social media agencies back in 2007, when there were no social media agencies. I started it with my husband. We sort of had no clue what we were doing, fell into the business and had no agency experience and had to learn as we went. Big time, Dave was like a visionary and a leader and was like very into growing revenue. And therefore, I was placed in the position of having to hold it all together and manage cash flow. That was a journey upon itself. I'm happy to tell you about some of those great successes and great mistakes during that process. But over the course of about 10 years, we ran it together. And then Dave left to launch a software startup. And I decided that I was going to really learn how to properly run a business and grow it and eventually sell it. And I did exactly that. Just about 7 years later, in 2021, we sold Likeable, which was our agency, to a technology services company. And I worked there for a few years. And in the process, just really realized that women are often under-resourced and undereducated when it comes to exit planning. And so I created a company called the Whisper Group, which focuses on exit readiness advisory work for women-owned businesses. And I match women with other women who have sold their businesses in their vertical. So if you're an agency owner looking to sell, I help you. If you're a CPG company looking to sell or grow or get ready, we really have women in that space to help you. So that's been my focus. It's my life's work, and I'm really excited about it. So thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I love, because when we communicated before the show, you told me that when you started your business, you didn't have any experience in business, and you had a baby on your hip, and like you thrust yourself into entrepreneurship.
Yep.
And you grew the business to a significant size to be able to sell it. What do you think were some of the key things that helped you grow the business?
Okay, so I think there is the stuff that you can't plan and the stuff that you can. So stuff that we couldn't plan was, we started as like a buzz marketing word of mouth agency. And then it was 2007, Facebook opened beyond the college market. We go, oh my goodness, social media is the fastest form of word of mouth. Let's go, let's pivot, let's be a full social media agency. So some of it is both the timing, and that's the part that we couldn't control, right? Like this happened, this major shift happened. And then our decision to very quickly and fearlessly lean into that timing was key. Like we were like, okay, we are going to change our name to likable. We are going to be for social media all the time. Like that's really where our focus was going to be. So that's what helped get us off the ground. But, pretty quickly, social media became something that no longer it was just like your nephew did, but like every agency had to learn social media. So agencies caught up. And at that point, some of the key revenue drivers were a few things. First was really productizing our offerings and making it easy to sell. So when you're selling services, you're really selling time. You're selling bodies and time. And by offering like products that had specific metrics around that time and what the output was, that made it easier to sell. So if we were selling social media playbooks or audits or buckets of content, having types of things that we were able to sell quickly and that everyone in the company could explain, that was really helpful. And then the other was just being fearless, knocking on every door, not caring, really saying like, I'm not going to allow myself to be intimidated. I believe that we are onto something and I'm going to go to the CEO, of every company, everywhere I go, I'm talking to every chief marketing officer and I'm networking like a crazy person. And those were the growth strategies. So definitely on the growth,
Okay.
that's where we went.
So you focused a lot on top line, driving sales any way you could, and then productizing
Yeah.
your services.
Okay, so in the beginning, I think in
Mhm.
general, as somebody I came from a media sales background. So I
Okay.
was always a revenue solves everything kind of person. Like I was always like, okay, we'll figure this out. But I will tell you, Trisha, when we sold in the beginning, nobody did any social media. So we won these Fortune 500 contracts. Okay. At the time, we probably had 10 people and we had to pay those 10 people, and those Fortune 500s pay on a 90-day pay cycle. And we had
Mhm.
no money. So like we very quickly figured out that revenue solved a lot, but it couldn't solve everything. Like you really had to figure out cash flow. You had to figure out how to make the business profitable. And that's where productization came in a lot when I was focused on profitability, because I needed to, it was basically like I would work people until they were like, "Oh my God, we need to hire somebody else." And then I'd decide to hire someone else. I just said this the other day. Like, if somebody came to me crying, I was like, "Okay, we have to hire another person." Like, that's not the way to run a business. The way to run the
Right.
business is understanding the numbers and the people and what they mean when it comes to growing it and how it affects your bottom line.
So you said so much right there.
So much.
So
That's your
for
profit world.
no,
Yes.
no, 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 no. First thing is I recognize that following you on LinkedIn, you and I share a similar phrase,
Yeah.
but I just do an extended version of the phrase. So we say revenue is vanity and profit is sanity. My addition is cash flow is reality. By the way, I didn't come up with this by myself. I saw it somewhere, but I use it in every speaking engagement, because no matter whether you're a $50,000 company, $5 million company, 50 million, $500 million company,
Mhm.
cash flow is super important. And what you were just talking about is, yeah, you can win a big contract from a Fortune 500 company, but if the cash is not coming in the door, you're dead in the water. You don't have enough money to hire anyone. And there is a mismatch between when cash comes into the business and out of the business. So you being a salesperson historically were focused on top line, but running a business, you realize it's important to look at the bottom line, which is profit, but and also cash flowing into and out of the business. Tell me, what does that phrase revenue is vanity and profit is sanity mean to you, uh, especially in how you're running your current business, when you're coaching people to exit? How do you leverage that phrase? What does that mean to you?
I'm gonna answer it in two ways. The first way I'm gonna answer it is in current, when I'm advising clients now, and then I'll tell you a story from Likeable that you will definitely relate to. So, okay, now I focus on building models that show that you can be sustainable and profitable with the business that you're building. Like, how I want to see theoretically that we can make money, and then I want to see it put into action, and I want to tweak it based off of what we learn from it being actually out in the world. So like really having that proper focus on profit is key. That is what, when I do valuations and stuff, your valuation is almost always off of EBITDA, almost always, unless you're like a tech startup. And even those now, more and more, they're looking so much more profit. So for every dollar you add to your bottom line, you are theoretically adding, anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 to your valuation. So it's once I get people to reframe of how important it is to save the dollar, that then helps them really think from a profit first kind of lens. In terms of cash flow, what you added to that, I will tell you that when we were running Likeable, and we were probably 6 years in, I think 5 or 6 years in, and we had grown. We were now like 30 people, okay? And several $1 million in revenue. And I was about to not make payroll. Like, cash flow was so scary. I ran to the bank, and had to fight and claw and scream to get a $100,000 line of credit. You would have thought it was $10 million. Like, that bank would have saved our business. I would not have been
Right.
able to stay in business. And so for me, with what you said about cash flow is so profound. So now I do teach women and have them focus on cash flow. But primarily when I'm looking at exit readiness, I want a model that's going to show that an acquirer can buy it and it can be profitable and will be profitable. That's where I focus now. But do not underestimate the power and the importance and the need for good cash flow, and apply for credit when you don't need it. That was my lesson from that mistake. I mean, that was like, definitely.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. So we've had this experience with a client, a startup client. So when we met them, their books were an absolute mess. I don't know
Yep,
who was doing their bookkeeping,
yep,
and they didn't really have clarity on what their performance was, but they were so focused on raising money because they were a startup and they had
of course.
burned through this $1.5 million in a year, right? So that should have been the first red flag to me. But once we redid their books and we saw how the business was performing and how much cash was being burnt every month,
Yep.
we told them early on, you're going to run out of cash in 2 to 3 months. They did not pay attention. They did not heed the warning. So now, 3 months later, I remember I was literally, it was a Friday evening, end of the day. You don't want to hear anything about
Right.
work, getting my nails done. And one of the founders did exactly what you did. She ran to like Chase or some bank like that
Yeah.
on a Friday evening
Yeah.
looking for a line of credit to make payroll. Unfortunately, they did not give it to her, but that you don't want to do that. You
And you
don't
don't
want to
want to apply
wait
for
till
credit
you're
line
at
when
the
you need it. You want to
yes,
apply when you don't need it. You want to have that backup
absolutely.
capital. But aside from that, uh,
Yes.
you touched on something else, which is the idea that raising money is going to solve your revenue problems and solve your profit problems. Like, it just doesn't. It just delays the inevitable if you don't have a good model and good cash flow systems. Like, it's actually what it does is it relinquishes your control, it dilutes your equity, and
Mhm.
does not solve the problem unless you have a strong model. Like, it's one thing when you have a huge order, that you can't fulfill and you need to cash flow to be able to make that happen. It's
Right.
quite another when we're raising money while we're burning through cash and just diluting our equity. I think it's a terrible way to live. I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Raising money is not necessarily for working capital needs.
That's right.
Raising money should be for
Growth,
growth capital
growth.
and backed by a plan to improve upon the money that you get a
Correct.
return on invested capital.
Correct.
That is when you go for other people's money and you give away an equity stake in order to get that capital. But it should be for growth capital,
Yeah.
not for working capital, which
Yeah.
is to make your rent and your payroll and your marketing and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
It's two different uses.
Totally
Okay.
different things.
So I love everything you shared, and I wanted to go back to um something you why am I losing a train of thought, but I'm gonna reconnect the
Okay.
dots. Okay. So the difference between managing your financials and your
Yeah.
performance when you're growing the business
Oh yeah.
versus when you're preparing it for sale. Can you talk to me about how do you think about managing the finances when you're just growing versus when you're preparing for sale? Like, share
Mm,
your experience and like what you coach people to do when
okay.
they're preparing for sale.
I think when I have people preparing for sale, I want them to have a model that, and a company rather, that is easy to articulate, explain, and share around their ability to generate profit. Like here's our revenue. Here's how we grow. Here is what profit we make. It's steady. Here's the longevity of our clients or our customer base. We want to make sure that we have a company that has proven success. When you are going to sell, acquirers are generally fairly lazy, and I don't mean that in a bad way.
Mm,
It means they don't want to
mm,
acquire a headache. So
right.
when we're focusing on sale, I'm focusing on eliminating every headache. It doesn't mean that you should wildly change your business model or your profit numbers right when you're preparing to sell. Why? Because acquirers are also, they might be a little lazy, but they're certainly not stupid. And they're going to
Mhm.
see if the year before you sell, all of a sudden you spend nothing or you cut your staff completely, they're going to see that as like a real red flag. And so, what I encourage people to do when they're growing and what I encourage people to do when they're selling is to keep great records. In other words, all founders have the benefit of running things through their business. This is, part of what the wonderful entrepreneurial spirit is. Like, we have this freedom, we have this business. Make sure that you have really, really, really strong records on what is essential for running the business and what is something that you do because it's in your heart or your freedom, you're excited to do. Let's say you give someone a huge one-time bonus. Let's say you plan a humongous retreat that is not necessary to running the business. I want to know that. I want to be able to always see, and especially in the last year or two prior, I want you to actually continue business as usual, but I also want to know what's essential and what's actually really not, what's additive, like what's something that you do
Mm.
nice versus something that you do because you need to do it to run the business. And that's going to help you come up with your adjusted EBITDA. So your EBITDA number that you normally have is the number that is your number that's usually in QuickBooks or any of these things that's in truth. Like, this is what we report. This is our tax number. But then there's like the modeling number. And so I want people to get really clear on what that is and the difference between the two.
So thank you for that tip. So, so to just add to that, a lot of people don't necessarily know what EBITDA is, but it's
Yeah.
earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
Yeah.
And it's not a net profit number, but it's the number that comes after revenue, and you spent direct costs or cost of goods sold, and then you spent on overhead, and then there's this thing called like operating income. So what is left over after you've managed the operations? What is that number before Uncle Sam comes and takes their taxes, and there's all these other expenses that come out that are non-cash, right?
Yeah.
That is the EBITDA number. And so you're saying that during the running of your business, most people kind of throw in, their personal
Their
expenses, or
car, their personal
car,
expenses.
their health, their
They
personal health
hire their
insurance.
cousin. They do
Right. They
whatever.
put
You know.
I've seen it. They put their wife on salary, but
Yep.
the wife is not really working in the
Right.
business,
Right.
right? So make sure you take note of those things, because then when you're presenting an EBITDA to a potential buyer, you're doing it with those things taken out, so it doesn't conflate or inflate the numbers or the valuation, the book valuation of the business. That is one really important tip. We prepare or we end up working with businesses who are also succession planning or going through
Yes.
some sort of merger or acquisition. And the other thing we do to prepare them, the other difference between like what you do when you're growing your business that can translate to what makes you valuable for sale, is making sure your financial operations are running smoothly. You have
Yes.
the right people in place doing the accounting and finance. Your numbers are in a reliable system, and then you're having reporting that shows how the business is doing. That we call like the financial core of the business. And so as FinCore, we strengthen the financial core so that you could get to peak performance. But I noticed that a lot of business owners, even though they're multi-million dollars, 7, 8, 9 figures, the financial operations is the last place that they invest money and they strengthen.
Yep.
And I believe it does not help optimize your price for sale. Do you see
Yes.
that in
Yes.
your
There are
work?
many, the things that optimize for sale and price often have very little to do with the numbers are the numbers, finances are the finances, and the things that make you inherently valuable to a strategic acquirer sometimes are even beyond what the finances are. But what you talked about with finance being the last thing and sort of like the thing that they don't prioritize is so true. And often that's because when you have a founder who has built a business, they're focused on what generates revenue. This is where, because without revenue in the beginning, you can't get off the ground. And
Mm-hmm.
there is no growth without revenue. So what happens is founders become focused on, does this generate revenue versus what is really important in a sale is, does this save or add to our bottom line? And a good finance team is so additive to the bottom line. But because founders are so focused on revenue, often they don't see that. And I think that to me is where someone like you comes in the best of ways, because you can show your value way more actually than revenue, because at the end, when you're valued almost always on your net income or EBITDA. And that is something that a great financial team can not only help you understand, but help you optimize.
Yes, I love that. Can you share, because I've heard different things from different business brokers and M&A advisors.
Sure.
What are some other things besides shoring up your financial operations? What are some other things that add, and profitability, of course. What are some other things that add to your valuation or your pricing? What are some other things that business owners can do?
Sure. Well, I created the Whisper methodology that talks about
Mm,
really the 7 areas that
okay.
improve your valuation for women in particular.
Okay.
It's men too, really, but this is specifically told through a female lens. So the first is you as a founder really understanding your why, because
Mm,
why do you want to sell? And what do you expect from that sale? And having an expectation that is in line with the market or reality or anything is going to keep you from being very unhappy. Knowing if you want to work afterwards for the acquirer, knowing what you're thinking about strategically, like all of that is very, very important. And getting clear on that is going to help you be way more valuable. So that's first, understanding your why, and then understanding the how. You should understand. So when you're valued on a multiple, usually of what is the equivalent of your net income. So if you make
yep.
$1 million and you have $250,000 at the end of the year in your net income, you'll be worth a multiple of that 250. And depending on your industry or the size of your revenue or anything else, you will be valued on a that number times whatever the market multiple is. You should know your market multiples, and you should know what needs to be done to get to the high end. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. You've got your why, your how, your income. You want to make sure that your income, whenever possible, I like to call it RED, recurring, expected, and diversified. So if your income repeats, you're good. If you're able to forecast it well, you're good. And if it's not all eggs in one basket, you're good. So in other words, two founders could have $5 million business. They could be exactly the same revenue, but their income strength could be entirely different, because if it's one client that's $5 million, if that client goes away, that company's worth zero. If it's 10 clients that are $500,000, you're in a much better situation. And so really looking at that strength around that income.
What's the E again?
Expected, recurring,
Got it.
expected, and diversified. So expected is it being able to really forecast it.
Okay.
As the secret sauce. So that is really what takes an acquirer that's like a normal financial acquirer, somebody who's buying you just for your business, and it makes it additive. This is what makes you unique. This is what appeals to
I love
an
that.
acquirer about you. And really, if you understand what is truly your moat and what truly makes you different, you're in a great space. And I have a lot of exercises in my book that do that. P is profit, of course, we're talking about today. E is executive team, making sure that it's not just you. Again, acquirers, a little bit lazy, but not stupid. They know that you're not going to stay in the long term unless they offer you heavy, heavy incentives to stay with equity, et cetera. So really, truly have a team that can support you and run the business without you. And then the last one is like really your roar factor or your resilience, because it's really challenging. And especially, Trisha, you'll know this because you've been through this so much. Going through due diligence is really hard. I mean, it's having someone look through you're so open and exposed, every single piece of your business, every mistake you've ever made, everything you've ever done is all sitting there on paper during that process. And having the ability to get through that experience and not waver on what you're worth is really, really hard. And so that's
So what you explained to me just now,
yeah,
okay, you said the whisper methodology, and I don't want to get this wrong because it's your phrasing, your methodology.
yeah,
But listening back to it, it sounds like 7 steps to a successful exit.
yes, it is.
Is that okay?
Yes,
Right? So understand your why, understand how you are valued,
yeah,
what is your income
your
strength, right? That's where you
yep,
came through the
your
red.
income, yep,
Right? What is your secret sauce? I love the word secret sauce. I tell people to write down their secret sauce all the time, but it's more of an insightful, introspective sort of exercise.
yes,
What does your profitability look like, your executive team, and what is your roar and your resilience factor? And I like that last one because I've noticed that uh, when you're doing succession planning, when you're exiting your business, you have to prepare your business, but you have to prepare yourself.
yes.
And a lot of business owners forget the preparation of self because
And it's
this business or baby or however they want to refer to it has been part of their life for so long, an integral part of their life, and then when it's gone, it's gone.
and it's your identity. You know, that's
Yes,
the thing, like, so much of our identities are wrapped up in who we are and what we do, and
yes,
it's when that changes, that's why so many people are so unhappy after they sell, and that's why if you really focus on that why at the beginning, why you're doing it, that is going to separate you from having a happy exit or an unhappy exit.
got it. So I love the 7 steps to a successful exit. And we talked about the importance of making sure that you are not just driving top line, but that you have a strong, repeatable bottom line
Yes.
EBITDA for sale.
Yep.
I've also heard that it's important to make sure that you are not the driving force behind the business. You alone are
Yeah.
not the driving force behind the business. So I want to get into, so we talked about like the financial aspects of growing and exiting and a bit of the emotional. I want to go into some of the metrics. Let's get a
Yep.
little nerdy here.
Sure.
Some
I'm
of the
ready.
metrics that you use to measure performance in your type of business, your social media agency, and then separately outside of that, what are some metrics that you coach
Uh-huh.
people on that you help them improve for exit?
Yeah. So I think that I'll speak to services-based businesses because I think
Okay,
I can go even more,
very different.
and
Yep.
now and agency-based businesses, I will speak to those. I can talk about others, but I think primarily the area.
Actually, that is helpful. If you could talk about the service-based businesses and product-based businesses, if you can, and then separately, like for exit.
Yeah. So a service-based business, one of the things that's going to be most important is going to be looking at what is your cost of goods sold. By the way, I learned this from my acquirer. So when I sold originally, I only had cost of goods sold as like pass-through expenses. But the reality is my cost of goods, like what it costs me, is the people who it takes to execute against that work. So I always try and set a metric or a percentage that of my revenue goes to the people that it takes to execute that revenue. So when I look at services-based businesses, I look at what is their cost to do the cost of labor, basically, like less remove all the pass-throughs, all of that stuff. If you're running media, anything like that, just your gross services fees, then what it costs to actually execute that. So that's my cost of my labor. Then I will look at my percentage of operating expenses, and I will also look at what my cost of sale is. And with an agency, sometimes that's a lot harder. So those are the 3 areas on services that I look at. What does it cost me to acquire a customer? Once I have a customer, what does it cost me to service that customer? And is that well within a ratio? So for me, Depends on the type of services business, but typically I'm looking at anywhere between 40 to 55%. I have found anything over 55% in cost of labor will leave you in a cash crunch almost always, because you're going to have operating expenses. It depends on how small you are. When you're just starting out, it doesn't matter as much, but as you grow, you're going to want to make sure that you have a ratio that allows you to have, and the way that I typically would do it is, and not, it's not for every business, but I would say, okay, less than 50 on cost of goods sold, 25 on SG&A, sales, and all the general and administrative, and then 25 on profit, which is what I would aim for. I wouldn't always get there. And
Got it. Yep.
I didn't hold myself to everything where it needed to be at every moment. But in general, if I'm looking at a business, I'll feel that that's a healthy margin. I like to see a lower cost of goods sold, but it's hard in today's world. It's really hard. But maybe
Mm-hmm.
I think with AI, you may see it come back towards a 40%, but you do want to make sure that you also have a system whereby you're paying people well, you're doing the right things. That's kind of what we want to see.
No, I love that. So that's the metrics for a service-based
Yep.
business, in particular,
Yep.
your agency style. What do you think, in your experience working with businesses that have exited, what are some important metrics for product-based companies
Yeah. So
to
you want,
measure?
it's basically the same thing. It's just that the ratios would be different. What does it cost to make the product? What is it, what does it cost you?
Hmm.
What's the, at the end of the day, what does it cost to acquire a customer? So when you have this product, here's what it costs to make it, here's what it costs to acquire a customer, and here's what's left over at the end. The margins may change, the numbers may change, but the fundamentals and the simplicity of what's needed in a business, relatively the same.
Got you. You mentioned some, so now when you are looking at exit
Mm-hmm.
and you're coaching people for exit,
Mm-hmm.
what are some performance metrics that you have them focus on to be more attractive?
I look at their net income. I look at their ratios. All of those ratios, I want to make sure are outperforming. And then I want to look at things like longevity of customers, history. That's where I start looking at diversification. And then what I look at beyond that, the numbers are the numbers. Like, it's always looking at, what is your cash flow? How much, when an acquirer buys this business, what do they actually get? What will they be able to cash flow from this business? What
Mm,
what's the model that the acquirer would have to do? Will they have to replace you? What will that, if they have to replace you, what does that do to your bottom line? So putting in, like, it's the model that you are today, but it's also what the model would look like under the acquirer. It's very, very helpful if you're able to go to an acquirer and say, look, if you buy this, here's what I'd do with it. And here's where it would go. And, like, sort of show them how they can make more money than you were making with it, can be really, really helpful. So those are some interesting things that I look at, but primarily it's those three. It's looking at what the cost of goods sold or the cost of labor is, what the SG&A is. Are there any optimizations we can do there? And is there any optimization to net income that we can look at? And that's on the financial side. And then the other
yeah,
side is what makes you really desirable. It's really focusing on the secret sauce and how you could be additive to that business.
that's like the intangible asset. That's the right. I mean, that's you can't put a value on it, but you do want to put a value on it.
Have to put a value on it, but that is also where people get unreasonable about what their valuation expectations are. You have to remember that most acquisitions need a basis and a source of, like, reference, right? An acquirer is not
Yes.
like, oh, here's $1 billion because you have this cool intangible. They might.
Yeah.
Not where you're going to go out thinking you're going to be in the market. You're going to be somewhere in the market based on what the market multiples are. And from there, you can build upon that based on your intangibles. That to me, is how I look at it. And I think people who tell you otherwise are often, giving you a
Yeah.
story, singing you a song and dance, if that makes sense.
So how long have you been in business in general and in total?
Oh gosh, 20 years, 19 years.
Okay. So 19
I
years.
had a career before that in media sales, but yes, 19 years.
So I want you to think all the way back to childhood, because it is said that our awareness of finances is formed by 7
Mhm.
or by 9, right? So what were some of your earliest memories from childhood around money? What was the lesson and who taught it to you?
Okay, so my lessons around money came from two parents who believed in two things about work. First, you should do what you love. They valued what they loved over everything else. They loved their careers. And second, security and pension above all else. So my dad was like this brilliant, amazing lawyer, and he became a judge because it was like it's more of a government job. My mom worked for a school system after she was in private practice as a social worker for a while. So like they were really into security and risk aversion. This memory, it's not when I was
Me
7.
too, my family too, my
Yeah,
parents
for
too.
sure, for sure. They were not debt people. They were not, they were really not, they were risk averse. I remember when the market crashed, I think it was 89, October in 87 or 89. I think it was 80.
Yeah.
I ran into my parents because I was like always an anxious kid. And I ran in and I was like, oh my gosh, you guys, look at the market crash. Are we going to be okay? And I remember them being like, oh, sweetie, don't worry. We don't do that. We don't invest in that. And so, I mean, my earliest money lessons were not to take risks. And when I started my career, I started in marketing, and a mentor that I had who worked at Radio Disney knew that I would be great at sales. And she was like, Carrie, you have to go into sales. And I was like, I can't. I can't have a job where I don't know the income or that, I'm too scared. And what she did was she paid me a draw against commission. So she said, I tell you what, I'll give you this flat salary. And at the time, I mean, be very open with you, it was many years ago, but at the time it was, I think she gave me 60 or 70K. And she was like, okay, I'm going to give this to you. And then when you sell out of it, you'll earn commission. And I was terrified, but I tried. I was like, okay, that's enough that I could try. And that is when I realized that I could control my own income, my own destiny, my own life. Because if I was the other thing with sales is if you're performing, you kind of come and go as you please. And what I realized was I valued freedom above everything else. And so for me, it wasn't my first foray into entrepreneurship, but it was my first realization. Thank you, Peggy Iafredi, if you're watching on LinkedIn. It was my first realization that I could control my own destiny and that there were no limits. There were no limits if I just took a little bit of a risk. And she helped me take a little bit of a safer risk, right? By giving me the draw. But it started teaching me how to take risks.
That is a beautiful thing. And so when you think about your first years in business,
yes,
how do you see, did some of these lessons sort of show up, and how was your mindset around money and finances when you started in business?
yeah, I was terrified the entire time. I went kicking and screaming. I mean, it was only because we grew so quickly that I couldn't deny that it existed. I couldn't deny that this was going to be successful. I fought it hard. And it's funny, I talk to people now, when I talk to my own coaches or anybody else, I say, I think what happened for me is that I ran that because my husband is a huge risk taker. He has no fear. He goes out there, he just goes and does it. And I think because he did that, I was very focused on holding it all together with like that scarcity, like this could fall apart. And what happened, I think, is that I took that mindset of this could all fall apart. And I grew it in spite of that. And I sold for a healthy multiple in spite of that. So I think I taught myself, if you're perpetually like this, you'll do better. But what I actually learned when working with some coaches later and going into this next phase of business is that, yes, I was successful doing that, but maybe I would have been 50 times more successful if I had allowed myself to dream big and still remain rooted in reality. Listen, we're finance people, right? Like, I think you have to be rooted in reality, but not allowing yourself to dream big is a real disservice. At least I think so.
So do you think that is one of your like greatest sort of financial challenges when you think back into running your business, that you didn't allow yourself to dream big?
I think I was too scarce. I think
Yeah.
I think I went in the opposite direction of like being very afraid. Like I always say, like people ask me, what would you have done differently with likable? right? What's one thing you would have done differently? I think I would have acquired another business, like versus being the one to acquire. I think I could have acquired more
Yeah.
and then sold it, you know, and like done something like that. But like go through that experience. You know, finance. I would know how to spot a good agency. Like just try it. But I was afraid. It was I think my biggest challenge is balancing risk with financial security. And I think the two things together, you know, finding that balance is key. You cannot go too far in either direction.
So you work a lot with women business
Yep.
owners.
Yep.
And part of my personal God-given mission is to transform the lives
Yes.
of small businesses through financial consulting, education, and resources, but particularly women business owners.
Yep.
What do you think are some of the financial challenges that women business owners face and experience?
Well, the obvious one is lack of access. I mean, you know this, lack of access to
Mhm.
capital, lack of borrowing. I mean, imagine if I don't know, when I got that $100,000 loan, Dave helped me do it. I don't know what would have happened if I did it on my own. I don't know because
Yeah.
I think the numbers are scary. So that's first. So let's take the systemic piece of this and put it
Yes.
here.
At the side. Yep.
I think the real feeling is exactly what I said when we opened, which is that we don't open businesses because we love numbers. We actually open businesses generally in spite of the numbers. Like we open businesses because we love something or we want control over our time or we have an idea. And so that aversion to numbers is really, really inhibiting. And the other thing is when you outsource your numbers, you want a really good partner like you who is going to actually explain it to you. I've seen a lot of women outsource their numbers and just say, hold on, they'll get you this, and have no idea what their actual margins are or why or anything else. I mean, I think if you work with a good, whether it's a bookkeeper or a CFO or whoever it is, they should be explaining to you those key metrics. Like when I look every month now,
Mm.
I look at my own numbers and I say, okay, what was the cost of labor? What am I spending on SG&A? And I look at the month to month trending and see like, oh, what was an outlier this month? And then what's my net income? And listen, the opposite is going too far in on like month. So like I would do this too. When I would get too hypervigilant, I'd be obsessed with month to month when in reality, a quarter is going to tell more of the story, right? Like if you look at that,
That's right.
not getting too fixated. But once you learn and get over the fear, most of the women that I know and work with just don't want to be bothered with the numbers because if
Mm.
it's not your forte, it's not fun. But when you're making money and when someone's explaining to you how you're making money, it is fun. So let's focus on how we make the money. And then as we're making the money, we must learn to understand our finances. I think it's mostly fear of understanding.
So, what did you do to level up your financial knowledge? What are some things that you did?
You're going to laugh. What
No, I
I
love it.
did, okay, so I managed like my QuickBooks. I did all this this is early days. So
That's what a lot of people do. They start with the QuickBooks, even though they didn't set up the QuickBooks
no,
right, but
no,
they start
so
with
wrong.
that.
No. But I didn't know. I mean, Trisha, I did not know what a P&L was. I did not know
Yep,
what a balance sheet was.
I get
So
you.
I Googled like course on basic I must have been like basic business fundamentals. And I took this like online class. I think it was very inexpensive. And it was like, this is what a P&L is. This is what a balance sheet is. And like I took the quizzes at the end and I felt it was such a small thing, but I felt so empowered that I could learn and like, oh, now I know. And then like, I didn't know gross margin. I didn't understand any of it. And so like that learning was like so key to me. It was very small and it was a baby step, but it helped me a lot. I don't even remember what it was. I wish I remembered.
I love that because, like, the because I have a dance background, I use the metaphor, but the dance with it's just
Yeah.
like
Yes.
a dance,
Yeah.
right? So you're hesitant and you're unsure in the beginning,
Yes.
and it is really helpful if you can get a guide, just
Yes.
your own. And I think for women, like, we have to feel like we're doing it ourselves,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And it was
So before
recorded.
we,
That's the other thing. I would have been scared to go to a live class. It was
yes,
first. It was
yes,
recorded. And
yes.
so I couldn't be intimidated.
You're afraid to, like, you
I
feel
don't want to look dumb.
shameful in front of, right. You're shameful in front of other people. So you wouldn't even go to a financial expert first.
Yes.
You need to do it for yourself and get
Yes.
a base level. And I got that. I literally got off the phone with like a prospect yesterday, and she was like, this is not my thing, but I'm learning the QuickBooks and I'm ready to like have this newer relationship. Right. So
Yeah.
you do need, to your point, that resilience and that, like, let's go get it. And
Yes.
then you go get it from Google University, YouTube University, wherever you get it.
Exactly.
And then you learn the buy side, right? Again, like dancing, right? And then you get an actual guide, a
Yeah.
professional. And now you start to invest in the people, the
Yes.
right people, to your point,
Yes.
that guide you in the dance. And then you start to feel yourself. And then you start to feel the music. And then you get to the point where you're now advising people on
Yes.
how to exit plan. And I loved how you explained that, because that's exactly how I see the dancing with the numbers to be, from this place of like fear, and I'm not really sure how I'm going to look on the dance floor. I might look weird. I don't really want to tell anybody, but everybody already knows that
That's right.
you're a beginner.
That's right.
And it's not an issue, because a lot of people are beginners,
Right.
right? Unless you are like me and love financials. But anyway, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's an experience that a lot of women business owners can connect to, and that, they experience. So that being said, how would you explain your dance currently with your numbers?
I think my dance with my numbers is exactly what I said, was unlearning the scarcity mentality and having the perfect mix between, um, you know, understanding how I make money and not allowing it to be the only thing that matters to me, right? Like it's not profit above all else, ride or die. There's nothing else that you should ever or could ever invest in. It is get profitable first. It is make sure you have a good profitable model and then take
Mm-hmm.
some risks. So I think for me, the dance is, am I comfortable enough? Am I confident enough? Am I ready enough to take the type of risks in the business that I want to do to grow? And will I maintain margin and profit integrity while I do that? And can I? So that's my dance. And every my tactical dance is every month. As I told you, I look at the numbers, look at all the key numbers, and
Mm-hmm.
feel really excited in good months and really like ooh in a bad month, but I understand why. And just knowing it is really important. I think it's important to go through the bad months too. Like it's
Yeah.
important.
Yep.
Like so and you're looking at it. But like if the trend overall is good, you're good.
So now think about yourself as a social media agency,
Okay.
and you had to depict uh some sort of visual using your imagination and creativity.
Okay.
What would that dance with numbers look like? What would the visual look like?
Oh my gosh. Well, it would be like modern dance and I would be doing a lot of this. Like a lot of like
I
hold it together and then at
love it.
the end she's
That's a contraction.
yes. Yes. And then I would do at the end I would be like flying through the air.
Soaring theory. I love that. You'd be contracting and releasing.
Yes.
That's
Exactly. That's exactly.
I I love that. I love that.
I don't
Okay.
remember that now.
I know. That's why I like it, because people remember sometimes more visually
I love
than
that,
they
Trisha.
do.
I feel like I want to draw it. That's
Then
awesome.
I would love you to. I would love
I'm
you to.
gonna post that. That's that.
And then sort of lastly, I mean, there's so much more we could talk about, and I would love to have this conversation with you again. What advice would you give to your past self, like year 1 or 2 in business? This is for our viewers who are like, I don't have my multi-million-dollar business yet, but I'd
Yeah.
really like to get there. What's 1 or 2 things? What's a couple of things you would tell yourself year 1 or 2 in business regarding money?
Focus on this present moment, where you are in this moment. It is, a lot of times there's a lot of financial anxiety about the future, there's wounds from the past, but where are we right now? Chances are, unless you are in really, really dire straits, you're at the very least safe. And so I think like focusing in that present moment for a calming sense to first get clear is very, very important. I have a lot of financial anxiety that comes up all the time, even after I sold all of it. There's a lot, it's sort of how you're wired. I think people are either wired that way or not. And so I always say, like, in this present moment, I am sitting here on this chair. I am here. My feet are on the ground. I am safe. And so that is like one piece. And then if I would tell myself to stay present versus like future forecasting, it just doesn't. And even with business too, it's like, where is the business today? Yes, it could be $100 million business. Yes, you should dream, but like, this is where we are today. And let's make the actions that improve today for tomorrow. That's something that I would look at. And the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to take risks. Just make sure they're calculated risks, not like,
Yeah.
but calculate them with a financial backing and understanding what happens if they work and what happens if they don't.
I'm also going to bring some things forward that you said earlier.
Okay, tell me.
So don't confuse top line growth with
Right,
success, right? Look for profit.
right.
Profit creates freedom, right? And we talk about having a good guide.
Yep.
Interview the people that are doing your accounting,
Yes,
interview the CPA,
yes,
interview the bookkeeper, make sure they
yes,
have accounting experience.
yes.
If when you're ready for a fractional CFO, make sure they have finance experience, not just accounting experience. Make sure they know how to analyze financial statements and do some forecasting. Like, interview your people and get referrals, but get a good guide slash financial dance partner to help you get educated and level up, right? So any parting words as we sort of end this wonderful interview?
Just, I love what you're doing. You're a great interviewer, and I think your work is fantastic. So hopefully everybody learns a lot from you and that you continue to grow in your own business because it's really awesome.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I look forward to having, I was just thinking to myself last week, I was at Luminaries Black Women Business Owner
Yeah,
Summit, and
yeah,
you're
yeah,
part of our Luminary community. And there's so many people that have conferences, right? And I know there's a popular conference called FinCon, but like, I just think about what I would love to, what I imagine and what I see is just this sea of women business owners like engaging in a different relationship with their
yes,
number, just
yeah,
like empowered. And however I get to create that experience,
yeah.
I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I look forward for the day where that experience that experience is happening, and I would love to have you back. How can people get in touch with you, reach you, follow you?
Okay, I am Carrie Kerpen everywhere on every internet thing you can find at Carrie Kerpen. Same on LinkedIn
Mhm.
and everywhere. We'd love for you to reach out. And then it's Carrie. The site is wearethewhispergroup.com, and you can reach me at
Oh,
Carrie at wearethewhispergroup.com.
so are you on LinkedIn? You're on IG?
I am on
Okay.
TikTok, but I don't really engage Facebook. I'm not on X anymore. I think it's
Me neither.
LinkedIn, and it's trash. Primarily LinkedIn and IG.
We are the Whisper Group, right?
We are the Whisper.
Okay, awesome. And then you mentioned a book. You got a
Oh,
book?
the Whisper Way
I,
says
you got to talk about you. You know what I'm saying? You got to talk about the things.
yes. Well, the Whisper Way is a book. It is the secret method for women entrepreneurs to scale and sell for life-changing money. And it is available on Amazon. Just look up the Whisper Way, and it includes all of those 7 steps.
So, right, we have authors on here.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So the Whisper Raid. So Carrie Kerpen, I want to thank you for sharing your insights and your experience and being very open and frank about your own experience and your journey through managing your numbers. And then I love that you are helping women exit successfully. Even though it seems like we are few and far between, there are women building multi-billion-dollar businesses and exiting maybe even at 6 7 figures, but they're exiting and you are helping them do that
yeah.
successfully. So thank you for being here. For those of you who are in the audience, I thank you for listening. If you have any questions or comments, anything resonated with you, please share it in the comments. This is live now, but it will live in LinkedIn infamy. So please engage with us in the comments. If there is someone that you also recommend that you would like us to have, I love to have experienced business owners on here, particularly women business owners, on my show, Dancing with Numbers in Real Life. And again, my name is Trisha Tate. I am CEO of FinCore, a fractional CFO and accounting services company, and author of the Amazon bestseller, Dancing with Numbers. Thank you again, Carrie.
Thank
And I
you.
look forward to our own personal
We are. We're gonna have our
one-on-one.
own chat, and we'll work on some stuff. I have some good ideas. So awesome.
Awesome.
All right.